welcome to season 2 of Understanding People, brought to you by Get Abstract. My name is Kirsten Miller-Doberman, and I am your host. In this season, we are looking at how to manage difficult problems created by the uncertainty of the pandemic and the way that it's kind of just completely changed, perhaps forevermore, our personal and professional lives. But I wanted to set up this season to really give all of you practical tools for how to understand yourself and others better so that we can really thrive no matter what the year 2021 may bring. With me today is a really exciting guest. I can't wait to welcome him on the show. Obviously, you can see him, he's there on camera. But we're going to be talking about how to manage complexity in this post-truth world that we're all living in. And to talk about that is Sean Pillot de Chenecey. Welcome, Sean. First of all, did I get your name right?
Yeah, that'll do. Sean Pillot de Chenecey, exactly. Spent half my life being asked to pronounce my name, so there we are.
I love it. Wonderful. Well, thank you for giving it to us the appropriate way. So to let you all know a little bit about Sean, he is a foresight strategist, a public speaker, and the author of 2 business books. The first, which we're mostly going to be talking about today, and is also in our Get Abstract library, is The Post-Truth Business, which focuses on trust, empathy, and ethics. The second is Influencers and Revolutionaries, which focuses on innovation, behavioral change, and sustainability. He also has a really great podcast, I highly recommend it, called The New Abnormal, which talks about cultural, social, and brand futures issues, especially regarding the impact of COVID-19. Prior to co-founding Brand Positive, which I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about as we go through the interview, he spent a decade with cutting-edge agencies, fascinated by individuals, movements, and events that shine a light on social and cultural change. He has a deep level of knowledge regarding the genuine issues impacting brands from now, next, and why perspective. So you can see why he is the expert that I wanted to have on to talk about this. So Sean, first of all, I wanted to talk about post-truth, especially in light of the pandemic, because trust has really eroded in so many of our institutions of late. And this was already happening prior to the pandemic, but it seems to be intensifying even more. And I want to talk to you about how we can recognize and then perhaps restore that trust. But first of all, what does post-truth mean?
Okay, so first of all, I mean, truth naturally is is an issue that's been reflected throughout history. You look at the philosophers are always the sort of first port of call, and so Plato spoke about truth as being the goal of philosophy, the basis of it, and without truth, we have a real problem on our hands. We put it into the present day that people like, let's say, Jack Ma will say, once you have trust, everything is easy. When you don't have trust, that's when things get difficult. The Economist will say that trust is the basis of all brand values, and that's why every business has a real sort of a reason to focus on it hugely. In society, if we don't have trust, we can't believe each other. In any part of society, in our personal relationships, in business relationships, in the relationship between citizen and politician, then we've got a real problem. So from the point of view of post-truth, in a sort of political context, I mean, that was something that was really, the term was coined by a journalist called Steve Tessish back when Ronnie Reagan was the president of the US. And to cut a very long story very short, when the Americans sold arms to the Iranians, it was totally illegal in order to then take the money back and to fund the Contra rebels who were taking on the democratically elected government of Nicaragua, and also putting pressure on Hezbollah in Lebanon to let go of some American prisoners that they'd captured or kidnapped, should we say. Basically, Reagan went on television, said that none of this had happened, not to worry about it, and then a couple of weeks later went back on TV to say, actually, yes. And he said, my heart told me that I was telling the truth, my head said something different. And what Steve Tessish, the journalist, found really fascinating was that, this is only a few years after Watergate, and in those days, politicians didn't lie. Imagine that. And so what happened with Reagan is that only a couple of weeks after he'd actually admitted he'd lied to the American people, after a brief dip, his popularity went up. So
Wow.
basically what you've now got is a society whereby people actually don't mind being lied to if what they're hearing is something they like hearing. And so this issue really of post-truth revolves around, if you like, the core belief that people are making their decisions based on a sort of subjective viewpoint as opposed to truth. And that's a real problem for society, particularly now, let's say,
Yeah.
whereby we can all agree, wherever you are on the political spectrum, I think we can all agree over the last few years that societies, generally speaking, certainly in the West, have sort of split in the sort of culture wars into areas of either sort of liberalism, which tends to be sort of linked around openness, and then sort of autocracies, which are all about law and order. And so you can see, again, wherever you are on the political spectrum, that that sort of tension is always there.
Yeah. It's a scary thing to think about the fact that trust in some of our most fundamental institutions, obviously, you mentioned politics and our government and social cohesion, trust between citizen and the government, but also you see this with academia. You
Mhm.
see this increasingly with science. Um, you see it, I mean, just across the board. And I'm wondering what you, as a cultural observer and a speaker and an author, you wrote this book in 2018. Do you sense that it's getting worse? And is there a way forward from here? Because also I want to add to that discussion is it's very interesting. We pride ourselves as being such modern liberal societies based on Enlightenment values, but actually what you just described and post-truthism is actually very much against Enlightenment values, which kind of said that there is a truth that can be discerned, that can be tested. We can use the scientific method to find truth. There is a truth and humans can access it. Are we so far away from the Enlightenment? Is there a way to get out of this?
Well, I think it's interesting. You can look at, again, in the world of philosophy. So, Nietzsche saw, a truth as something to be attacked, and basically that it was all about sort of, again, sort of a subjective viewpoint. That led to, as I mentioned, the book, to the postmodern thinkers, Foucault, etc.,
Yeah.
Derrida, who had who literally saw truth as being something that could be completely dismissed. As opposed to an Enlightenment thinker like Wittgenstein, who would say, we make sense of the world around us by evidence and rationality, by sort of by basing our viewpoint on something solid, provable, and real. What have we seen over the last few years? One of the really worrying things has been like the war on expertise,
Yeah, exactly.
science. And if there's one thing I think that we all need to really lock onto, it's to trust in science again. Now, one of the benefits of COVID, and it's an odd thing to say,
Mm,
but I think it's true, because I mean, COVID is, along with all of the tragic stories and the deaths, etc., there have also been upsides to it. And if like one of the upsides, along with, as you mentioned in my podcast, my writing, I talk a lot about the sort of growth of community, which has been clearly self-evident around the world, to a greater or lesser extent in various societies. One of the real benefits has been a realization that science and expertise is right back center stage, because what we've seen is that, along with all these sort of, the healthcare workers, and if you like, the important people that make, life work, um, that we've seen that we have to rely on the scientists, we have to rely on the doctors, etc., and they are going to get us through this.
yeah, absolutely. I want to switch gears to talk about the role of technology in how it's created this kind of post-truth world.
Yeah,
The benefits of it as well, because there definitely are benefits, right? It's
yeah,
good to make progress in philosophy as well as in life and in technology. And so there are some good things offered by it, but also there are some unforeseen consequences that I think, and I know that you and many other social commentators and writers and experts do as well, believe that there are things we should be cautious about when it comes to technology. First of all, what are some good things that you see technology doing in this post-truth era, especially during COVID, in creating good and a benefit for both businesses and people?
Well, I think the obvious ones, obviously, are in terms of, as mentioned, in terms of sort of scientific thinking and the speed of scientific thinking that we've seen happen during COVID. You know, things that would have taken, years and years and years to be like to go through all of those uh, points of provability in terms of and testing in terms of medical advances have just been really, really speeded up for the public good, while at the same time, obviously, those scientific advances being very carefully sort of judged as well. Meanwhile, again, we go back, if you like, to the almost like to the birth of social media, which was effectively only a short time ago. Let's not forget, one of the sort of comments that used to go around constantly was that, it'd be fantastic. We'll see the sort of the democracy of information. Everyone's voice can be heard. Therefore, it's going to be the person in the street will have as much of an ability to have their voice heard than the media baron. And actually, what have we seen? It's those old newspaper barons that basically owned the access to information and what information was put out there have simply been replicated by the media barons, essentially, of Silicon Valley. And one of the real problems in terms of a problem in post-truth and a problem of trust and belief and truth in society naturally has been fake news and alternative facts and deep fake technology, etc. And that really goes down to the fact that throughout history, whether you were sitting in a marketplace in Athens, listening to or talking with Socrates, or whether you're doing so today, then this issue of word of mouth has always been the most believed form of communication by a mile. And so, a classic example of this is when you or I instantly retweet something because it comes from someone who we like or respect, and we haven't really got time to read what they've written, but the headline sounds good, so we just instantly retweet it. Then one of our friends, because we're friends, they also then believe what we say, so they might do the same thing, and on it goes. And so this issue of, if you like, the instant retweet being a way that misinformation, as in information that we aren't deliberately putting out there to deceive. We've just done it. Perhaps if I send something to you that isn't correct and you retweeted it, that you wouldn't be deliberately deceiving your friends and your contacts. So you would just be passing something on, as opposed to classically like state-led bad information that has been deliberately put together. So, disinformation and misinformation have really been supercharged by social media.
Gosh, it seems like such an overwhelming issue, and how to tackle it. I'd like to ask you how to, for some advice for leaders, particularly in businesses. Obviously, you write business books and you talk to this audience. They have to deal with the technology and the social media use of their own company, their marketing messages. Obviously, they want to care for their employees as well. What advice would you give to leaders trying to manage the complexity of everything that we're talking about in this kind of post-truth world, not only when it comes to how they manage their employees, but also how they position their brand? Because I know that a lot of leaders, especially right now, are having to reposition a lot of their messaging and a lot of what they present to consumers, their customers, as what their values are in such a changing world.
Well, I think to me, the key thing about brand values nowadays, and we've been through a decade now of people just, talking endlessly about sort of, brand purpose, which generally speaking has been absolute nonsense. Lots of brands pretending they're nice.
Yeah.
It's just endless. But, at the same time, a few doing things very, very well. I mean, every single conference that any one of us and any one of your audience, no doubt, has been to for the last decade, you can guarantee that someone's got on stage, and along with saying glib things like change or die, they'll also say things like, a brand we should all really respect is Patagonia. I mean, as we should, but the things that everyone says it. What I find interesting is that everyone talks about Patagonia. How many other brands out there actually then do exactly the sort of thing that Patagonia are doing to the extent that they do them? Virtually none. So it's one of those those sort of brands almost in business terms lives in the conference hall. Everyone sort of bows down to them. So as they should, we all hugely admire, a great deal, if not all that they're up to, but who actually then takes that forward and does something concrete? So I think this thing about brand purpose, or you say brand integrity, to me, basically, like sort of, behavior is brand. So
Mm.
therefore, effectively, don't just tell me it, show me. So, in the book, I talk about what I term reputation capital, as in, is a brand trustworthy, reliable, and competent? And you can judge a brand in however you use that term, trustworthy, reliable, and competent in any medium, be it, again, the politician of choice, be it the car brand, the soft drinks brand, the fashion brand, whatever. So if they're not trustworthy, reliable, and competent, then to me, why is this so important? Because in virtually every sector, one of the only ones, oddly enough, not being technology, particularly with regards to Silicon Valley, because they're effectively the Facebooks of the world have bought up everything around them.
Mm.
So if you can say in virtually every sector, there is choice, to state the stunningly obvious. So therefore, if there's huge choice, and if the difference between most brands is infinitesimal, difference between most
Yeah,
brands effectively is the
absolutely.
advertising, which again is very similar. So therefore, one of the few things one can actually do, looking at the choice you're about to make in terms of your sort of informed consumption, is to say, is the difference between brand A and brand B down to effectively which brand do I like, and do I like them based on the fact that I believe them, they are trustworthy. And so one of those. So you can do that virtually anywhere, but say with exceptions. It's again people like Facebook that in many people's eyes, particularly mine, have done so much harm to society. If you just switch your Facebook, as I did many years ago, then really you're just, in many cases, harming yourself, because you just lose touch with a lot of
Yeah.
people. So, which is why, again, a lot of people think they should be broken up. It is wrong. They own the other companies that they own.
Yeah. I want to follow up with that about, building that trust with the consumer, especially when it comes to marketing departments and marketing budget. Because the tension that I see as both someone who has worked in marketing and is a consumer of brands, obviously, um, I'm alive and breathing. Um,
Yeah.
is that there is this difficult tension with wanting to show and demonstrate trust, and obviously having a marketing budget where you want to reach and take advantage of all the technology and AI that there is in order to collect data and make things, um, everything is about highly customizing the message to the consumer, right down to some of the very smallest, tiniest details. While that might be very effective marketing, it also does it corrode the trust of a user who's maybe now even younger generations are very skeptical of how much data is collected on them. They're very
Mhm.
much like, how much do you know about me? Why? Moving to private and encrypted messaging services, et cetera.
Mhm.
So it's highly customized. And so that makes me feel good. This ad really serves me well. But at the same time, how do you know that much about me? I don't trust you. How
Sure.
do marketing departments find that balance?
Yeah, yeah. Well, again, I wrote about privacy a lot in my first book, and that's really when the privacy debate was really just getting going, and we've now seen the privacy issue becoming bigger and bigger and bigger. So again, I think it's interesting to me now, as we are in 2021, that the debate has been altered again by COVID, as have so many things, because of things like tracking technology. So we
Yeah.
all know, in terms of test and trace, that it's again, one of the dreadful ironies, one might say, that in those countries that are very autocratic, that have basically, whereby citizen privacy does not exist, and citizens are viewed, as many people might think, in that sort of system, as objects. So in many cases, particularly as a sweeping statement, in the West, we have looked at, the individual is paramount and the state is low down. In many other countries and other parts of the world, that sort of, if you like, is turned upside down. Now, it's clear that in terms of certainly the initial stages of the fight against COVID, that having a society whereby everyone can be tracked and traced at speed is a system that has worked, that has actually protected societies. And that is the first job of the state. So it's a great irony, the terrible irony, that on that
Yeah.
level, actually a lack of privacy has been beneficial. Meanwhile, certainly again, in most countries whereby privacy has been classically something that we viewed as being very, very important, talk to any psychologist, they'll tell you that privacy is a vital human need for basic human sort of mental well-being, that we've had to give up a lot of our liberties for the common good. Rightly so. Obviously, the vital thing is going to be when the COVID cloud begins to lift, as it appears to be now, that we grab those liberties back and that they aren't just quietly forgotten about and, kept at a governmental level. And again, I think no matter which part of the political spectrum you're from, it's clear that privacy is a vital human need, and that the individual should be paramount and not the state.
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many more things that we could talk about, and I really encourage everyone who's watching, if you want to hear more from Sean, please check out his podcast, The New Abnormal. Check out his books, The Post-Truth Business. Obviously, you can get a little snippet of that on getabstract.com, the summary, and then of course you can read the whole book. So many good tools in here. Last couple questions I want to end with, Sean. I think we can all see, from the political turmoil to the economic turmoil to just the massive changes that society is undergoing globally, that finding some kind of common truth upon which we as humans can connect with each other is vital, while understanding that different perspectives are very important, different perspectives on the truth. What hope do you have, as an author and a cultural observer and a philosopher yourself? What hope do you have that even in a post-truth, post-modern world, we as a society can build a foundation upon which we can grow post-pandemic, that we can do better?
I think I'm full of hope from that point of view, I mean, for instance, the World Economic Forum, which has just finished its 2021, or its initial stages of its annual meeting. Obviously, it'll be doing so again in Singapore fairly soon, under the title of the Great Reset. The great thinking there has been that what did COVID do, or what was one of the things that COVID did for us all, was it gave us all time to think. You've done it, I've done it, all of our friends, acquaintances, neighbours, etc., have done it. So people had a great deal of time to actually think, what is important to me? How do I want to live my life? And without going over the top about it, I think one of the really clear things is that people realize that we don't want to go back to exactly how we were, because how we were clearly wasn't working. One of the real existential reasons being the damage to the planet, in terms of the point of view of the ecological crisis and the environmental disasters that continue to happen. So people think, again, no matter where you are in terms of your beliefs in what is a brand, to what is a political viewpoint, to how should we live as a society, I think we all generally can hopefully agree that we want to live in a better way, and it's crucial. We've seen the damage it's been caused to societies via things like populism and the culture wars. No one wants that, apart from the very, very small percentage of genuinely dangerous people at either ends of the political spectrum. Most people are reasonably centrist in their viewpoints when it really comes down to it, when the emotion is taken out. So living a life whereby we can all rely on each other, we can actually believe what each other is saying, is something that is clearly vital. And I think most people clearly want that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I want to just bring back that focus to something you said a few minutes ago, and that was pointing out, when people really did trust, they trusted word of mouth. They trusted what someone said. They trusted who they were talking to, as you mentioned, like listening to Socrates in the forum. And I thought, oh, I would love to go back in time and do that. Or talking with a good friend, or, as we talked about technology, getting information via a message service or personal communication with someone. And I think the more that we can focus our attention, rather than on the chaos that kind of is going on around us, but on the good that we can do in our personal relationships, and that good exchange where trust is built, and then trust can be passed along, and we can really build an unshakable foundation for the future.
Absolutely. Amen to that.
Sean, thank you for giving us a very hopeful message today, and for the great work that you are doing.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Goodbye, Sean. And goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Understanding People. We'll be back with another one in just a few weeks. If you want to watch any of our previous episodes from season 2 or from season 1, of course, you can check them out on our Get Abstract social pages on our YouTube channel, as well as on the journal or getabstract.com. Please feel free to enjoy, share with your friends and colleagues. We just want these resources and this good information to get out there and be as helpful to as many people as possible. So wherever you're watching us from, have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you again soon. Bye.